So we're recording. And then share screen. Can you all see that? Simone or Hayley, give us a thumbs up. Thanks. Thank you. So from beginning. Fab. So I reckon today's session will take just slightly under an hour. It's going to be practical, so you should be able to get a real feel for how you can build yourself an audience development plan. So I'm going to keep an eye on the weight room as we go through as well. So yeah, like I said, today's first session is understanding audiences. It's going to be taking a real look at what audiences actually mean, not just those who are a kind of transactional relationship of I have a theatre show to sell and I need your money and time so that you can come and see it. It's about understanding a more meaningful relationship with audiences than just trying to get that from them, I think. So as I've said, I'm Rachel. I'm the Business Development Manager at Unity. As you're my audience, and this is all about being meaningful, I should probably tell you about why I feel qualified to be talking to you today. So I've been doing marketing education in the arts just under 9 years now, and I've been very fortunate to work with fantastic venues as well as some festivals. So that's just a bit of an overview of some of the places I've worked, predominantly Northwest based, and a combination of large ticketing venues, free entry museums, and some freelance work both for Brighton and Edinburgh Festival, as well as some companies attending those festivals as well. That's just a bit about me. I don't have a degree in marketing. Everything that I know I've learned on the job. My degree is in history and sociology, which given our other series is all about there being no one way into the arts. I feel like that's important to say, that it's I found my way to loving and understanding audiences through the study of society and sociology and the means that art. So that is really the angle I'm coming at with this conversation. Fab. So today's session is going to be split into two halves. The first half is going to be very practical. It's going to be looking very much at what an audience development plan actually is, what it looks like, how you create one, why it's useful. And then on the second half of the presentation, we're going to take a quick look then at an audience relationship plan. An audience development plan is very strategic. It puts things into boxes and it serves the purpose of you being able to condense your thoughts into something that you can easily see and access. It also serves the purpose of you sharing your thoughts about audiences to funders, to colleagues, to other people that you're working with. If you're an artist, if you're trying to pitch for a slot in a program, you'd be sharing your audience development plan with those people. It's a very pragmatic working document. On the other half is an audience relationship plan. This is much less structured, and what I want to talk about in this is the questions that I think you need to answer about yourselves to take that audience development plan and embed it with meaning. So in that, we're going to be looking at how we talk about ourselves, how we talk to our potential audiences, and how we build a relationship from this. As we go through, if you've got any questions, please just use the chat. If there's any language at all that you don't understand, please just let me know. I am going to spend a whole slide of this talk saying how you have to understand your audience and speak in a language they don't understand. So it would be very embarrassing if I started speaking in acronyms or what I like to call marketing bullshit and you don't understand it. So please just drop me a message in the chat if there's anything that I'm saying where you're like, why does she keep saying that? What does that even mean? Because I'll make sure to explain it. I will also try not to do that though. Don't worry about making too many notes. Immediately after this, I'll share the slides and I'll also share the template of an audience development plan with you following the session. At the end, there's also a link to some resources and further training opportunities. And finally, if you're joining us on this call today and you want to put what you've learned today into practice, have a go at writing your own audience development plan and get a bit of feedback, I am available for one-to-one sessions. So please just use the details you'll see on the end slide to get in touch with me at the end. So we shall begin. So we'll start off with looking practically at what an audience development plan actually is. So an audience development plan is your statement of intent for who you want to reach with your work. So if you are an artist or working with a theatre company, Your audience development plan will be a place to talk to people about why it is you want to reach them, who those people are, and how you're going to do that. It's incredibly systematic. It's a practical blueprint for growing. If you're venue-based, you often start with a benchmark of who your current audience is, and it's who you want to work towards in a set period of time. It tracks and monitors growth. And that's one of the reasons it's incredibly beneficial. You can look back on it and look at where you started and see where you've ended up. It's a really great target-based way of tracking your progress through communicating with the audiences that you identify. An audience development plan is usually a requirement of funding. So it is important to say that your audience development plan does have an audience consideration of its own. If you're an NPO funded organisation, the Arts Council will require you to have some kind of audience development plan. If you're applying for the funding streams, there usually is a box in any kind of application that tell us a bit about the audiences you want to attract. This kind of work is very, very common, and you will be quite used to talking about audiences already. But it is worth noting that actually your audience development plan is not talking to your audiences, it's talking about them, and you'll see that as we go through the document. There are 5 key stages to an audience development plan. The first is to outline your audience goals. So when you begin your project, you'll set out who it is that you are aiming to attract. You may come to this conclusion based off gaps in data. You may see that there is an underrepresented or underserved group of society that you wish to attract with your work. It may be that your goal is to keep the audience you've already got really engaged, offer them something new. I think always remember, this isn't always just about going after the gaps and the holes. It could actually be building meaning to the audience you've already got. They themselves are a goal. So you'll set out those plans, and that'll be the initial thing that you outline in your plan. You'll then link these goals to your wider organisational aims. So if you're working on a specific project, so a specific piece of theatre work, a specific workshop, for example, these will all talk to your wider aim as an artist, as an organisation, as a business. So you will need to be aware of what it is you want to achieve on the wider scale and why exactly it is that your project fits into this. And we will come on to working that out later on in the session. You'll then go into a very detailed look at your different audience groups. This is something that is often referred to in marketing as segmentation. You'll hear this come up a few times on the call. Segmentation is effectively a fancy word for grouping audiences together. In this section of your audience development plan, this will be where you really dive in and take a look at, say, you want to attract younger people to your work. What exactly does that broad expression younger people mean? How is it that you find them, locate them? How do you speak to them? And what is it that you want to achieve with that group? You're going to explain how you're going to reach these goals. This section obviously is incredibly beneficial if this forms part of a funding application for you, as this really allows your funder to see exactly who it is that you want to achieve, but how you're going to do it. And you're effectively justifying where your money is going if they're going to fund your project. And finally, you're going to set targets, timeframes, and measurements of success. This actually allows the document to be a really practical working tool for you and for anybody around you to get organisational buy-in about what it is you want to achieve. If you can always refer your decisions back to the targets that you've set and where you are in the process of achieving them, you're creating a really holistic, practical work. So what do you need to begin working on? So first off, data. So data is very strongly interwoven with everything you do with audiences, which I know can be a problem because a lot of people don't have it, but you will need access to as much historical data as possible. So anybody who's your work, your organisation, your brand, this can be found through a combination of audience surveying and box office data. So if you're a touring company, you will need to work with the venues you've been to. All venues are more than happy to help support on this. They all have third-party data policies in place to be able to give you as much detail as they possibly can to help. So please do not shy away from contacting some of your networks that you've been working alongside. There we go. Fab. So please do not shy away from asking those questions. It is crucial that you get that information, and effectively part of it is yours because it's your work that they've engaged with. So please do ask venues those questions. Analytics. So this is a tool that you can all access irrespective of if you are a artist working with ticketed data at a venue, or if you're a marketer for a free venue that doesn't collect ticketing data. Analytics allow you to track who is viewing your online profile, and it'll tell you a lot more about the demographic makeup and the journey that your audiences online have taken to get to your product. There's a lot of free resources out there for you to be able to do this. Sometimes for fun, I do it for my own personal Twitter, where it's basically me just talking about football on there just to see who it is that's actually engaging with me. There's a lot of free tools going on. Google Analytics being the main one. This allows you to track who's coming to your website, for example, what their age and gender are, their engagement level time, dwell time, where they've arrived from. This can help you decide how you're going to market your work. If you can see quite clearly that a lot of people came from Unity's newsletter or the Everyman's newsletter, or somebody's done a tweet for you, you know that they're a real advocate for your work and that's working. So it really helps you to inform who it is you're going to form networks with across the city that you're working in, to really get your work to as many people as possible. All social medias do have their own inbuilt analytics tool as well. So all you need to do is go on your Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and select analytics, and you'll be able to see just as much information. Some are better than others. Twitter analytics is much more about engagement with the individual post, whereas Facebook is great for demographics. You can see quite clearly age, gender, ethnicity, all tracked through that. And then audience research. So whereas the first two are quantitative data for you to really get to grips with, audience research allows you the qualitative side of understanding your audiences. This will give you the most accurate read on your audience's characteristics because they'll be self-defining themselves. So where possible, if you can always try and incorporate surveying your audiences with any project that you do, this will give you the most rich amount of data to be able to really set these base levels for growing your audience. Again, work with venues, work with the companies that you're in collaboration with. They will be more than happy to help facilitate this for you. You just have to be brave enough to ask, because it's really no burden on them. The data will benefit all of your partners as well as yourself. So I couldn't recommend surveying highly enough. And finally, your organisational aims. I think I alluded to this in the previous slide. To develop your audience development plan, you must be able to speak confidently about the overall aims of your business. You'll need a confident and a refined mission statement. And this is a lot of what part 2 of this presentation is going to talk about. So very quickly, what if you have access to none of these things? So if you're coming to this completely new with no option for data, you've never talked to a venue that has collected it, you're a free outdoor performance space where people engage with you simply by walking past, you will struggle to access quite a lot of these things that I've told you are a requirement of building an audience development plan. However, there is enough data that you can go on that's in the public domain to be able to build one successfully. You can look at annual reports from venues. All venues do post their figures as annual reports. Likewise, the Arts Council, they send out a benchmarking report, so you can clearly see what audiences are engaging in what areas. So it's a bit more generic. I think it's done by city rather than by individual venue, but it gives you a really good idea of the benchmark of audiences across the arts and culture industry. City council reporting, this is really good if you're aiming for a specific demographic. So if you are applying for funding to work within a specific postcode, for example, city council and local authority reports will give you a really good indication of the gaps in those areas that your work could potentially fill. Again, these are all in the public domain and can be found on the city council website, so interrogate these as much as possible. Also interrogate any sector reports that have come out on digital trends. You know, if you are developing an audience development plan and you don't want to necessarily go off your instinct that young people are using Instagram over Facebook, which is an instinctive assumption, there will be digital trends and sector reports in the digital industry that will give you that information quite clearly that you can embed into your audience development plan. And finally, trust your instinct on who your audiences are that you want to reach. You know, as individuals, I would imagine the majority of us here use social media in our personal lives. Every time I know I do a tweet from my personal Twitter account, I'm very aware of who it is I want to see it, because it's a combination of save the arts and oh my God, Liverpool played so well today. And there's two very clear audiences that I know that I'm talking to every time I do that. And you will all have that instinct within yourselves every time you choose to post a picture of your banana bread on Instagram or whatever it is you've done in lockdown. Really harness that, because as great as all of this data is to inform your understanding of audiences, you will already know who you want your work to be for, and you really need to trust that instinct. So what we're going to do now is we're going to actually take a look into an audience development plan. I've made you all a template that you're all welcome to use after this to form the baseline for yours. I'm just going to quickly stop sharing and then reshare the screen. So let's see. Is that okay? Can everybody see that? Fab. Cracking. So this is a template for an audience development plan. This template is for the most broad version of an audience development plan, but it can be used for a venue. So the following document contains unities, audience aims, targets, actions, and measurements for success. It can also be an audience development plan for a theatre company. So this following document contains teatros, audience aims, targets, actions, and measurements for success. Or it can be for a specific project that you're working on, a specific show, a specific workshop. Bits will drop in and out depending on the scale of the project you're working on, but it does work for every kind of audience you're trying to attract, whether it's for a venue, an artist, or an event. So everything you'll see in square brackets is what you'd need to change, unless you're fortunate enough to be called insert organisation name. So we'll quickly start. This is the first section that will give you an overview of who you are as a business. Even if you are an artist working alone in your bedroom, you are a business, you're trying to achieve something. So this is the point where you'll explain what it is that you want to achieve. So you'll begin with a short overview and history of who you are. It should reflect how you talk about yourself in your business plan, your About Us section on your website, any funding applications you've already put in, and in your online communication. This is really the through thread through all of your communication in this About You section at the start of your audience development plan. From there, you'll break out your organizational aims. Most people tend to have 5 to 10, but it can be less than that if you're a really refined product. Some of these aims can be what your organization creates, the specific audience groups you're looking to sell. So are you a children and young people's theatre company? That's a very specific organizational aim. How your work might benefit your local community could be one of your aims. How does it provide something unique, exciting, entertaining? How is your organization a sustainable business? It isn't the fun stuff, but an organizational aim should always be to try and be financially robust, and you'll try and put that within that section. What are your future ambitions? Always great to look to the future in organizational aims. We aren't just practicing our work in the here and now, we are looking ahead. And finally, any environmental, social, economic ambitions. Environmental in particular, there's a lot of work going on with the Arts Council at the moment to encourage companies, artists, venues to embed environmental policy within their aims. So there's some great guidance on the Arts Council website around that, but that could potentially form one of your aims as well. Then from the more generic, broad look at who you are. Sorry, I'm keeping that in the chat. Absolutely. So Hayley's asked, could you use our mission, vision, and values in that bit? Absolutely. This is the exact place to put that. So that would probably say, I don't know if you can see me highlighting, but that would sit up here. As much detail as you can give. Also great to include as any history of the organisation. You know, as a venue, Unity has a long history, you know, right the way back from like late 1920s. And this is always great to give the context of where your organisation has come from and why it is you want to aim for the people you're going for now. So yeah, please do use any mission, vision and values in this section. Then you're going to need to take a look at current audiences. There is no point just going for a blind stab in the dark about the audiences you want to attract without at first reflecting who it is that you currently already engage with. So if you're a touring theatre company, you may need to call upon the venues you've toured to for some of this information, like I've said. Again, the survey data, Google and analytics, they're all readily available for you. So this is a section where you'll embed that kind of information about current audiences. So where do your current audiences come from geographically? What is their drive time? How many people do you engage with per year? If you're a venue, what is your target capacity? If you are a non-ticketed event, how many people do you want to attract? If you're working online, which I think a lot more people will be doing, how many people do you want to reach with your online work? Where are the places you want to find them? So that is your current audiences and who they are. If you, I'm not going to go into too much detail on this because you could do probably a whole 2-hour session with someone much more qualified than myself from Audience Finder. But some people do choose to segment their audiences into pre-made audience segmentation models. The Arts Council have their own, and there is a requirement of MPOs. So that's called audience spectrum, and effectively it's defining your audience within phrases such as metro culturals, as you can see at the bottom. Another example is experience seekers. These are much more about how your audience defines themselves, what they engage with. Again, Morris Hargreaves McIntyre used something called culture segments. This is another way of breaking it down. So they could be called city prosperity or rental hub. It just gives you a bit more understanding of the characteristics of your audience. I've popped links in this that I can send to you, but here's an example of how you would break it down according to those segments. So you'd outline metroculturals, you'd give a brief description of who this audience is, the channels that are used to reach them. This is all already on the Arts Council's Audience Finder website. They will also be able to give you a breakdown in your city, and then you'd need to work out yourself the breakdown of your current audience via surveying. You'd then set your target. So that bit is optional. You don't have to break it down according to audience segments. I just thought I'd pop it in there in case any of it does come up for you if you have applied to Arts Council for funding, because you will require a basic understanding of it. Again, if that is relevant for any of you on this call and you want like a deeper dive into segmentation models from Arts Council, Morris Hargreaves McIntyre, do just let me know and we can pick that up in another call. Again, within your current audiences, you're going to want to break out how your current work to diversify your audiences to date, what your motivations are for doing this, and then provide the following detail. So a breakdown of current age engagement, ethnicity, socioeconomic background. Again, socioeconomic background is one that is coming up a lot more on funding applications. The best way to measure this at the moment is against postcode data. And then mapping that postcode data against what that area represents in terms of socioeconomic activity, and a disability breakdown. So you'll then present all of this as a percentage of your overall audience, if that's possible. If not, just leave it as it is, because it speaks to a wider understanding of the ecology that you're creating your work within. Again, these figures can be pulled from Google Analytics or bespoke analytics pages on individual social media platforms. The final few things you're going to want to really interrogate before you look to the future are your current booking behaviour. So how do your current bookers make their transactions? Are they in person? Are they over the phone? Or are they online? How regularly do your audiences engage with your work? So are they a one-time attender because they just really, really, really liked that show? Are they loyal to your brand? Do they come and see everything that you're in? Is it a combination of both? I think most people will find it's a combination of a few, but repeat attendance can be a KPI of its own, key performance indicator, so something to measure your audiences against. So it's definitely important to interrogate just what your engagement level already is with your audiences. Then you'll look at your percentage of this, what tools you might have already put in place to increase loyalty. Do you already have a newsletter? If so, pop that in this section because that talks to booking behavior. You're trying to create a regular conversation with your bookers, and that's important to note at this point. Do you already have a membership if you're a venue? Do you have a cheap ticket discounting scheme? All of those things will go in this section to talk to how you're already trying to increase loyalty, brand awareness, and attract first-time engagers. Finally, digital behavior. So this will be the point where you'll talk about how you're already engaging with people online, what platforms you use, and what your online reach is. All of this information is super easy to access within the social media channels themselves. But it's worth noting because, again, you're benchmarking where you are now and how you want to grow. I do think this section might actually become slightly bigger as we move in a post-COVID world to a lot more work going online, because if you can benchmark yourself retrospectively to what your digital engagement growth was prior to the virus, it'll be really interesting to see where you all end up potentially in a year's time when you have explored more channels of creating work digitally, or just improved your social media presence online through lack of being able to have the face-to-face interaction. So I do think this section might become increasingly more important, and I'd really recommend that you all take a little bit of time to start benchmarking that now, even if it's just for your own benefit at this point, because you never know when you might need that. And finally, this section is just worth to know any challenges you've had to date. You know, these can include issues with engagement or capturing information. At Unity, our challenge is always data. We have a really high percentage of bookers show up on the day. So I think it's about 65% average. Those of you that have been to Unity will know then that if 65% of the audience are only showing up with 20 minutes to go before the show to get their tickets, the queue can be very long, and to have to ask every single person for their data to reel off the GDPR script, you just wouldn't get the audience in for the curtain. So usually you just give them the ticket and send them on their way. That is our biggest challenge, is how can we increase early booking so that we can understand our audiences more and have more people to survey and get to know. I think it's quite a common story for a lot of people. Quickly look in the chat. Yeah, it's a real challenge. Andrea said it's really nerve-wracking. It's a real challenge to encourage early booking. It's interesting. I know the cinema model is to make it cheaper online before you get there, or have reserved seating in cinemas, because I know a lot of people like specific places, and that does seem to work for them. Pre-sales and memberships are another tool that people do use to encourage capturing information. It is very, very nerve-wracking trusting that the 65% will show up on the day, though, and that is where data is really important, because if you have other people in your organization starting to panic saying, but we've only sold 30% of tickets, it's good to have the knowledge to be able to say, we do know that more will show up on the day. It does seem to be a theme across, particularly across Liverpool venues. I think the audiences are a lot more last minute in how they engage. And it may be that a bigger piece of work should be done maybe with the City Council, with Culture Liverpool, around as a whole how we can change the city's perception of booking, making things feel more imminent, like they are going to sell out. So maybe that's a bigger project, but for anyone who does have sleepless nights, seeing that they've only got 10 people coming, but feel like they know that more will arrive, I really feel you on that one. So that is a section on your current audiences. Then you get to the main section. This is target audiences, aims and actions. So this is a section where you are going to talk about who you want to reach and who your audiences are going to be in the future. These are your aims and your actions for a specific period of time. A lot of people put together 4-year plans and then segment that within years. Some people do it for a specific project. So for this show, my aim is this, and I will achieve this by that. It can really work across whatever period of time or scale of project you need it to. You'll need to begin with a statement of intent for what you want to achieve with your audiences in this period. So if your intent is to simply build on the relationship you already have, that's absolutely fine. You don't always need to be going after new audiences. It's absolutely okay to just build a relationship with the one you already have. It may be, though, that you want to increase the diversity of your audience, the number of people coming from a specific postcode. So this is the section you will lay all of this information out. You can split this into 3 clear areas. So these are your 3 audience segments, and then there'll be sub-segments within each one. The first one is demographic. It's pretty self-explanatory. Here is where you'll list the targets related to demographic. So I would like to attract more people in L8, which is the postcode that Unity borders. I would like to increase this by 20% within the next year. It is at this point that I would outline that information. But you don't need to go into too much detail just yet. Maybe it's that we need to be better engaging as a business, the Chinese-speaking community of Liverpool, given again we are not far from their area in which they most commonly reside. So maybe we need to set ourselves some targets for that. You know, Liverpool's a very multicultural city and a lot of languages are spoken in it. So I always encourage language to potentially be a KPI in this section. Schools is a big one. And families and young people, you may have a target set around that for the amount of young people you wish to reach. Then any communities you want to reach, segmented according to characteristic. This will change according to who you're writing this for. So for example, age. I know that the City Council and the Arts Council have different definitions of young people, which are different to how we define young people. We just say a generic under 30. I know a lot of people say 14 to 24, 15 to 25. In this section, if you are writing it for a specific audience or for a funding application, you will need to make sure that you're speaking in the categories that they define. But that doesn't change how you see them and how you'll speak to them. So this could be that you want to increase the number of under 14s engaging with your work, or those who are deaf, for example. And finally, set yourself some targets for artistic community, if that's one of your kind of key missions. If you're, you know, I know Hayley on the call, her company does a lot of work engaging with other artists and giving them platforms and opportunities. Make sure you write that in as a KPI. Your artistic community is absolutely an audience in itself. I know it doesn't feel as much like one because it's much less transactional, but it absolutely is. So if you want to attract artists and offer them the opportunity to take part in a workshop, for example, get that KPI in there, because it is just as much an audience as attracting someone paying for a ticket for a theatre show. The second segment is audience behaviour. So this is where you'll list your behaviour targets and growth figures. So I want to increase the database so that I have a better understanding of who it is I'm talking to. I want to increase this by 20% in the next year. It would be in this section that I write that. Attendance targets. So if I know that the average attendance for each show is around 80%, how do I push that and push myself to get it to 90%? Profit figures as well. I may be selling 80% of a show out, but I might be giving half those tickets away for free. So you need to make sure you split out your figures for attendance and your figures for finance, because they don't often tell the same story. Amount of feedback collated. This is a great target to have in there, because the more feedback that you get, the more you will understand your audiences. And when you come to do this whole thing again in a year, you'll have much more data to put in this top section about current audiences. So always great to have some kind of target for yourself about understanding audiences and how you can collate more information about them. And there it is again, increase advanced booking. That is, I think that will be a target on my list forever, it feels. And then the final grouping or segment for breaking down your targets and growth figures is your relationship with your audience. So we've gone through what your audience look like in demographic. We've gone through how they behave in terms of engaging with you. But this one is about relationships. So it is how you can continue that relationship on from the initial first conversation. So you may want to target to increase the number of audience members that engage with you per year. So if you have a database of 12,000, but you've worked out that actually 7,000 of those people have only been once 4 years ago and it's a lot of historical data, you know, your target could be to re-engage those people who've previously accessed your work and get them back on the books and get them back engaged. You know, that could be with some kind of discount, with some kind of offer, but always good to try and reignite that relationship of those that you maybe only see very sporadically. You may want to increase the number of first-time bookers. I think this is a big one. I think that's what a lot of people do, bookers or engagers, depending on if it's a transactional event that you're offering. Increase crossover with other parts of your offer. So, I mean, you know, I've worked in a few multi-art centres which have housed a gallery and a theatre, for example. It may be that you put on traditional theatre shows in the sense that you're performing out to a paid audience, but you may also run workshops and courses. You know, any kind of crossover that you want to create. You may want to get people to stay for a pre-show, a post-show talk with the director, putting in some kind of figure to encourage that crossover, if that's something that you're interested in, is always good to outline. Increase audience engagement with online activity. So you may know that a certain amount of people find out about your work through Facebook, but do you want to increase this, or maybe channel more stuff through the website that you've paid thousands of pounds for? That's good to pop in there. And then increase brand awareness. So this is probably the most broad of all of these targets and growths, because what is brand awareness? Is this just the amount of people that are engaging with you across all of your channels? Is that talking to the amount of people who are advocating for you? So you may want to put a very specific target in there about, you know, the amount of people who share your work. Anyone who shares your work is an advocate of your work. So that all goes towards increasing brand awareness. Quite a lot of that sits within that section. And then finally, because this has been quite a chunky bit, you will then take everything you've outlined in this section and you will break it down into nice, neat little boxes that determine who these people are, how you want to reach them, and when you want to reach them by. So I've just given you the top example from audience demographic, but you'd want to do it for, I'm pointing at my screen and none of you can see that, I'm going to use the mouse. You'll want to do it for anything you've outlined. So I'm just going to take this one as an example. So you've identified that you want to target young people. For me, I'm considering young people for this specific project that I'm working on to be teenagers. I may have come to that conclusion based off the work that I'm trying to promote. I may have come to it looking at some city council statistics around underrepresentation of teenagers regarding the certain topic that my work is discussing. And I'll add that in there. I'll then discuss my aim. So my aim is to increase the number of people at this age group who engage with Unity by a certain percentage. The reason it says increase or maintain, it may be that you are an absolute wizard with young people and you just want to really maintain that great relationship you've got. It's not always about going up. Sometimes it's about just really strengthening what you've got. So that's why it's increase or maintain. You'll then list the ways that you are going to try and do this. So what platforms will you use? What places will you advertise? What partners will you work with? So in this section, it may be, so they're teenagers, so maybe we'll set up some sessions with teachers, or we'll go to some of the university freshers fairs. We'll engage with other charities in the city that specifically work with teenagers and recreation. We'll advertise in, I'm trying to think of something not horribly stereotypical, Snapchat. But you know, you can see what I'm trying to say there. You'll take a look at where it is that these audiences most commonly engage, and maybe if you are fortunate enough to have advertising spend, that's where you'll pop it. And then when do you want to achieve this by? So if this aim is for a specific project, you'll say, well, I want to achieve this by the time that I have finished my workshop with these young people. Or if you're a venue, you may say, I want to increase this in the next 12 months. And then how will you measure and test if it's successful? So are there things that you can put into place to really robustly test the success? So maybe you might consider setting up a young person's discount scheme, and then you've got active data of people identifying themselves as interested to test. Maybe it's measured just simply through audience data or surveying at the end, but that's where you'd place that information. So that is a very brief outline. Obviously in this section will end up being your longest section because you will be replicating this across all of these things. So whether it's database growth, your target audience would be growing data. Your aim is to increase your data. The way to do this is to make things cheaper online so that people have to book in advance. You want to do this, how will you measure it's been successful? You will see how many people are on your database at the end of the year. You can replicate this across all of these different areas. And obviously this list up here is just my examples. You will have more, I would imagine, or more refined examples of audiences that you want to attract. And then the final thing, which I'd recommend doing, but is not a requirement, is to take all of the information in the first few pages of this document and pop it into a key performance indicator table. So what this allows you to do is just really track your progress. So where are we? Let's find our young people one more time, seeing as we've worked with them. So let's look at our teenagers again. What is our baseline? How many teenagers do we already have on our system? So I'm gonna, let's say we've got 1,000. And what do I want that to be by year one? Okay, let's try and get up to 1,500. And then you can really see where you are. You can track your progress halfway through that time and see if you're going to fall short. Set yourself a stretch target for year 2 as well, but it's always good to make a note of where you're starting from. And your baseline column can absolutely say 0 if you don't have this deep data yet. Again, that's just important to measure that you've started from very little data understanding and worked your way up. So this table is just really beneficial. It's sometimes how you will be asked to present this information to funders as well. So if you can fill one of these in, I would recommend it. Again, these are just examples. You can have your own audiences within there. So that is just I was going to say a very quick overview. I don't think it was quick. An overview of the very practical view of what an audience development plan is. This is now yours to take away and do with what you want. Like I've said, if you want to get in touch with me, if you want to have a crack at writing one and then ask me to look over it, I'm more than happy to do that because I appreciate that is a very skeleton template, and I've tried to make this conversation practical, but as broad for as many different types of you, if you're an artist or someone working in a venue, as possible. So if you want a little bit more detail, please just get in touch. So very quickly, I've gone through all of this detail about why you should create an audience development, about creating an audience development plan, but I should probably tell you why they're useful. So funding applications, as I've said, the majority of applications will ask you to submit at least a section on audiences you want to reach. If you've already created your audience development plan, you can lift that information into whatever template your funder is asking for. Staff cohesion, well, I think these are great for getting a whole kind of group of people motivated around the same goal. So it may be your colleagues that you work with within a theatre company and venues. It may not just be within the marketing team. It may be that you're engaging the talent development team, engagement, programming, senior management. Everybody can see the clear goal that you're working towards as a business and why it is that you want to reach these audiences. It's measurable. It's really great to have measurements just to be able to see what it is you're trying to achieve, and then it will make your success more clear and attainable because you can see your growth and you can celebrate your growth, which is definitely important to do. And finally, it forces you to really interrogate the information you currently have. So even if you go through this process after today's call and in interrogating the information you've got, you realize you don't have a lot, well, that's a great starting point for you to be able to build on who it is that you want to reach and how you're going to find out more about them. It's a really strong base for growth. All this being said, there are things that are missing from a traditional audience development plan. So this is mostly because your audience for your audience development plan is not your audience. It's funders, staff, it's yourself to be able to really refine your ideas. So as a result, it can slightly oversimplify the complexity of each audience segment. You saw then in the example I gave how quickly I just bunched together every kind of teenager in a box. you know, it's useful to be able to categorize in this sense, to just have a real clear, refined document that allows everybody involved to understand who you're talking to. But, you know, it is important to know that not all teenagers will play on Snapchat or whatever awful thing I said earlier about how to engage them. And you just be really aware that, you know, your audience development plan is deliberately simple because of what it's trying to achieve, but it can oversimplify the complexities of each audience segment. They're really useful, but you do have to think beyond these categories for when you're thinking about how you communicate. It would be a dangerous game to play to assume that every single person within each group does consume media in the same way, for example, or has the same access barriers. So just be careful of just considering them that box on your audience development plan, which I'm sure nobody would do, because actually those boxes are very beneficial for giving you structure. But you know, we know that people are very broad and can sprawl out beyond those little categories that we put them in. It also can focus slightly on a transactional relationship with audiences. You know, there wasn't a lot of space in that audience development plan for narrative, you know, and crossover within different segments. So, you know, if I've got a group of teenagers, I need to segment them one further for teenagers that have attended Unity before and teenagers that have never been before, because even them in themselves then suddenly split into two different categories. And then from there, you may take it as, well, they've engaged with the building before, but they came on a school trip. They're not autonomous bookers who made the decision to come themselves. So again, you've layered yourself down further, and suddenly what looked like a nice little, we're going to invite teenagers to come and see this work, is a much more complex audience group. And you should be segmenting the language that you use to that minute detail if possible, rather than saying, in this copy to teenagers, this is how I will describe myself, because it will be different for those who have been before and those who haven't. The hard to reach trap. A lot of audience development plans do still fall into this trap, even though thankfully the phrase hard to reach does seem to be on its way out. You can still see quite clearly that when we talk about the audiences we want to reach, some of them are the ones that we'd call the ones that we find more difficult to try and access. The problem with this expression is simply that it puts like the emphasis on the audience as being difficult, and actually we're probably the ones that are difficult to reach, and it's our job to make ourselves more open, easy and accessible. And a lot of the second section of this, the final section of this is going to come on to, but yeah, it's just to be really aware that, you know, don't let the language that you use in your audience development plan seep out into audiences. And finally, you'll often have to create one of these before you even know what your project is if you're applying for funding. So that's where the kind of broader understanding of your organizational aims will be really beneficial. So the final section I'm just going to quickly touch upon then is audience relationship planning. So this is going to look beyond the categorizations of audience development plan and look at how we embed meaning into these targets, and how we build a relationship that isn't just one that's transactional and measurable, as we saw in an audience development plan. I've got a really lame analogy that I'm going to attempt to try and make work, but may give up on halfway through. Think of it like a dating analogy. So if the first half of this presentation is you trying to determine the kind of person that you want to date, why you want to date them, how you're going to try and find this dream person, then this second half is really going to touch upon getting to know them, how you speak to them, and how you lay the groundwork for a long-lasting relationship. This could either be a great marketing presentation or a terrible dating presentation. I just don't know at this point. But what is crucial is how you talk about yourself. To build a meaningful two-way relationship with your audience, it all begins with how well you can talk about yourself and the language that you use. Now, anecdotally, there's been a lot of debate on theatre Twitter throughout COVID about why there hasn't appeared to be the same level of public outcry for saving the arts or theatre industry as there has been for maybe some of the other sectors like sport or catering. Now, this call is not the place to debate whether that even is a debate, whether there has been just as much outcry for theatre. But one interesting proposition is that the reason the arts haven't really had that same kind of public backing is because as people working in the arts, we've gotten so used to making our case to those who keep us afloat, so funders, programmers, colleagues, other industry bodies, that actually we've allowed the language that we use to try and justify our existence to them to seep through into how we communicate with audiences. And this language is very different. You know, for example, you wouldn't ever describe your audience as a segment to their faces. It's a word that we use to clearly categorize people. But if as people working within the arts, we are feeling continually the need to justify why we deserve funding, for example, or why we deserve airtime, a slot, it's easy to see how we could have changed our language to talk to those people, because they are the people it can sometimes feel are determining our fate, as it were. So what I'm going to take a look through now is you working through the language that audiences can find themselves in. So coded and descriptive language is the trap that we can sometimes fall into because we are trying to talk to so many different kinds of people. And basically what I've done here is I've created a list of descriptive words that most commonly feature in About Us sections on company and venue websites. So a lot of companies, venues, artists describe their mission as creating a diverse program, diverse stories, enriching people's lives, breaking boundaries, challenging, taking risks, you know, the word serving humanity, emerging artists, BAME, socioeconomic. These are regular words that are used in how we are all talking about ourselves as people working in the arts, venues, businesses, artists in the arts. When we put ourselves out there, that first impression, these are the most common words that are being used. Now, I would argue that actually in this first impression, whilst these are words that we're really used to using within the industry, they're actually quite difficult to see yourself in if you're an audience member. So audiences require active, accessible language, and you shouldn't shy away from describing to somebody exactly what they will do, what they will see, what they will engage in when they come to your venue. So this is active, practical language. So they're just small tweaks that you could make to your mission statement that actually an audience member can see themselves in. So it's great that we describe ourselves as an accessible theatre venue, but you know, what does that mean to somebody? Now, accessible could mean affordable. So why are we not just using the word affordable? We do have very, very affordable tickets. Accessible could mean that it's actually welcoming and relaxing. Everybody knows what it feels like to be welcomed into a bar or a pub, relaxed, to be able to just enjoy yourself there. These are kind of practical language that speak to emotions that your audience already understands. You know, it is important to aim to be accessible and to share that with the world, that you are trying to make your product as accessible as possible to the most amount of people. But actually sharing that with an audience is probably clearer language that you can absolutely use. Again, similar to the word diverse. Now, if your mission statement is to tell diverse stories, you know, I very clearly know what you're trying to do, and it's a very important thing for everybody to be doing. But actually, if you can be more specific, I don't think many audience members define themselves as diverse. They define themselves within the characteristics of themselves. So Black, deaf, working class, young, you know, or your age, just your age. Use the language which they will use to describe themselves, because fundamentally your mission statement is not to serve your funders in the industry. It is the very first impression that an audience will get of you. And if you can get this bit right, and if you can just very clearly see, if you can make an audience very clearly see what it is they will get when they are working with you, and keep it as broad, simple, and clear as possible. So, you know, genre, really important. You know, don't shy away from saying that we work with puppetry, because then, you know, the audience member knows exactly where their time and money is going. And, you know, it's not hidden amongst breaking boundaries or taking risks. It's very, very clear what they're going to see. And you're going to find the segmentation and the selling it to them in a way that's meaningful according to the demographic much easier if you've been able to outline yourself in a clear and simple way to begin with. So how does all of this work together? So avoid coded language would then be my first kind of bit of advice from that section. Coded language are these words that we looked at here, words that we're all used to using, but my God, they mean nothing to anybody outside of the industry. Hard to reach is the worst example of coded language. But, you know, socioeconomic, you know, we use it, but don't define yourself to audiences within these categories. You know, if I was to take this a step further, I'd say don't define yourselves by them to funders. We should make every bit of work we do as accessible as possible. We don't know who's at the other end of our funding report. We don't know who the background of our staff base. Why not just start from a base of very clear, simple language would be my take on it, but I do appreciate there is a bit of industry change that needs to happen there, and it is sometimes easier to speak to certain groups in the language they understand. Try and use active words that your audience would describe themselves or experience as. So entertaining for some reason has just completely dropped off the face of the earth as a way to describe theatre, in replacement of challenging, risk-taking, you know, all these different things. God, people just love a good time, and they're going to really want a good time after all of this. So don't shy away from the practical emotion that an audience member might feel engaging with your work and offering that up to them on a plate. And that is placing the audiences at your heart of your communications rather than a description necessarily of yourself that would benefit funding reporting. And make sure it's simple. Make sure that it doesn't require translation between segments by the marketing team. You know, sometimes as a marketer, you can sometimes feel like you get given copy for a show, and it's your job to kind of put that through a translator and spit it out and make it work for as many different audiences as possible. And that is our job, and that is a really important part of our job, is to make sure that we're finding the sections of, say, show copy that work for each individual group. That is effectively what segmenting your communication is. However, if we can start from a base understanding that's simple and accessible, then actually we stand a better chance of reaching as many people as possible, or anybody that does wish to engage. And ensure there's buy-in from staff on your mission statement. You know, don't ask 40 different people for their opinions on it, because you'll never agree. But if you can create a mission statement that, you know, your parents, whoever it is that you might be talking to their friends in the pub about how great your work is, if they can sum that up clearly and accessibly to, you know, their friends without you around, that is exactly what you want. You know, for us as a venue, we want every single person to be able to accurately tell people why it is they like working for us. And, you know, if they're using some of these words back here, you know, I don't want them to be reeling it off like a script that they've read underneath our name on a brochure. I want them to be able to say it because they really believe that we are affordable, entertaining, welcoming. So yeah, really try and get buy-in from as many people as possible, because every single person is an advocate for you if you can make sure they understand what it is you're trying to do. And this will be how you build your mission statement. So finally, how does it all work together? So the first half of this was very much based around product. And so the program, how you segment your work to different types of people. The mission statement is the broader look. So you're the seller, you're the company, you're the venue. So you need to at first create a welcoming invitation or first impression, an accessible, easy to understand mission statement, clear communication about what it is that means to engage with you and how that should be done, and practical active language. This is all relating to you as the seller, as the company, as the venue, as the artist creating work. This is your mission for yourself outside of your product, and this should be as broad, clear and accessible as possible. On the other half of that, you need very personable and targeted communication. So you've gone from one half, which is very broad and simple, that as many people can find themselves in as possible, to very, very targeted, so that that person knows you're specifically talking to them. So whether it's communication about show, event or opportunity, you'll want to produce different copy for each of the different audience groups, different imagery, maybe, maybe visuals work better for some audience groups than others like more descriptive language. Different communication platforms, we've already touched upon that. So you do need to balance both sides of the coin with having a really clear understanding of who you are, and then a clear understanding of the very specific target groups that you want and how you're going to engage with them personally. And then if you can talk about yourself simply, confidently, in a way that's quick and easy to understand, once you've piqued their interest, you can then begin to get to know your audience through the research from the audience development plan and follow this up with a personal targeted conversation. And if this is a dating site, then you've got yourself a date. So the very final thing I'm just going to touch upon now before we finish is once you've got your audiences, remember to treat them with kindness and respect. Again, if we were to go back to the dating analogy, you don't want to put all that work in, working out what you want from your life, finding someone who's going to give you it, just to then not be very nice to them. And it's the same with when you build an audience as well. Your audience isn't just a passive transaction, it's an active, long-lasting conversation. And here's just a few ideas of ways that you can really treat that audience with the kindness and respect they deserve once you've got them into engaging with your product. So list trigger warnings. It's really simple, but no one wants to be caught by surprise. It's a really, really small thing that can make such a difference. And you know, some of the best pieces of work I've seen, I don't know if anyone's seen Breach Theatres. It's true. I found it so harrowing. I was absolutely distraught afterwards, but I felt so safe in feeling so distraught because I knew what I was going to see when I went into it. I knew that there was some access support at the end of it if there was anyone I wanted to speak to. The program notes were brilliant in listing any kind of charities. Give your audience that information. I know that some people feel like it's spoilers, but you don't want anyone to not feel safe within your space that you're creating. So trigger warnings, access and support, using that program notes as best you can, free sheets. Ask your venues, if you can't afford to make a free sheet, ask the venue that you're touring to, because they will absolutely make one if it means it's going to be a safe environment for your audience. Accessible copywriting, accessible formatting. I've popped a link on the last slide to this. This is all about making sure that as many people as possible can physically access your work. So there's information there around font size, font color, different ways in which you can layer your text, for example. Translated copy, making sure that as many different languages can access your copy as possible. Familiarization videos, these are great for anyone who's wanting to do work around autism. Familiarization videos are a means of relaxing your audience before they arrive to where you're going. So even if it's just yourself saying, hi, I'm Rachel, and when you walk in, your toilets are going to be on your left, or when you arrive at the show, don't be worried if there's some people on stage. It really helps put at ease some of those audiences, and it's also fantastic for schools in breaking down that barrier. So work with venues on this. If you are working with venues and that is your ambition as an artist, is to tour to venues, there's people there more than happy to help out, because I know a lot of you are one-man bands probably in terms of producing, putting on the show, writing. So any support that venues can give in this area, they would be more than happy to. And there's my top tips. I'm not going to go through them all because you'll get these notes afterwards, but it's basically summing up everything we've spoken about today, about gathering as much information about audiences, taking the time to get your mission statement right, and making sure you understand your audiences, making sure it's a shared goal. And when you've got them, please look after them, because they're great. So here's some resources. You'll get a copy of this. So it's some toolkits if you want to go on and build some more ideas. There's some stuff specifically around if you're a touring company, when you maybe don't have as much access to data. Audiences on tour can really help you with that. Bits around engaging disabled audiences, family audiences. And then on the right-hand side of your screen, there's some links to some training. So Google Digital Garage, if you don't know what it is, it's an absolutely brilliant free tool. You can take as many free courses as you want on there in audiences, in understanding data, in analytics. It's brilliant. You will be blown away by the kind of things they offer. And then the Arts Marketing Association, they do come at a cost, but do run some fantastic courses similar to this. And that's my info. So if you have anything you want to follow up on, if you've got any questions, if you want to run through with me your audience development plans, funding applications, you've wrote a mission statement and you're not sure about it, please do get in touch. I'll also try and share with you any training opportunities that do come up as well. Yeah, that's the end of the presentation. If you've got any questions now, I'll be more than happy to take them, or if you would rather just follow up with a one-to-one, you know, it is on offer to all of you. All you just need to do is drop me a message and we'll arrange a time to have a catch up. So I'll also be sharing that template that I went through with you. I'll email you all in the next half an hour or so with that, in case you want to just have a little practice about putting your ideas. And yeah, don't be intimidated by all of this either. It seems like a lot, but if it's the first time you're doing it, it will feel like a project. But what you will achieve if you can do this once is a great baseline to go off, and then I promise you, it will make your life easier if you're spending hours going through funding applications and writing new bits of audience data every time. If you've got this one document to pull off, I promise it'll make your life easier. So if there's no questions now, please do stay in touch. I really, really meant that. I'd love to speak to you all individually and get to know the kind of work that you're doing. So thank you, everyone. Really appreciate your time. And now I'm going to awkwardly